I'm going to be sharing tonight on the faces of anger. And interestingly, I started this preparation, I think maybe sometime from October, not the actual preparation, but that I really wanted. I think I had mentioned it at some point to Reverend Michelle that I thought of sharing on anger because it was just Moses's life and his story stood out to me a lot in that period. And for some reason, we did other things because October was mental health month, and then we did other things that other topics that never got to it. But I went back to it today as I felt led to go back to anger, the faces of anger. And here's a check-in that I want all of us to answer for ourselves. You don't need to answer to me. I'm going to ask them out, but answer this to yourself. Really, this is one of the things we do, especially in, we call it mindfulness or check-in, but especially even in our field in psychotherapy, you check in always with the client who shows up in that space. And many persons in their workspaces, you supervise others, you probably do that. You check in with your employee or staff or whoever in that moment, maybe even your supervisor. But do you ever get angry? I mean, I could stick my hand up. Probably we could ask, do you get angry a lot, right? But do you ever get angry? And why were you really angry about that thing? So think of maybe some of us get angry a lot so many times that we're not even sure which are the things, but pick anyone. Pick the last thing you really were angry about. Why were you really that angry about it? And then I want you to ask yourself, whose problem was it? Because sometimes the things we're angry about were really not our problem, right? They were, other people's business and things, but yeah, right? So whose problem was it? Did you take it on? It wasn't yours. Whose problem was it? Think about it. Think about it. And I want you to answer these things because they're important. Did you express that anger? How did you express it? How did you express it? All of us express our angers differently. And all of us, especially those of us who get angry a lot, right? Dr. Denise, I saw that in the chat, that each time we express it differently. How did you express that anger? Maybe in that particular thing you're thinking of. Now, based on what you did it get you what you were hoping to get from it? Did it get you that? And what would you do differently? Especially if it didn't get you what you were hoping for, what would you do differently? So that's our check-in. That's a self-reflection, and I want you to think about those for yourself personally. This is where the Psalms would say Selah, to just pause and think about these things. I get angry. Was it really necessary that time? It wasn't even my problem. I started to yell and throw a tantrum. I don't know, maybe I was hoping to get somebody's attention, to listen, to hear me. But it didn't really go the way I wanted. So then what would I have done differently? Right? Think on those things. So what is anger? Research indicates that anger is an intense emotion. So whether you use a dictionary or you just Google it or you look at it in, whatever material, anger is an intense emotion that you feel when something has gone wrong or when someone has wronged you. So that's also the other thing. And it is typically characterized by feelings of stress, frustration, and irritation. And so this particular explanation came from the verywellmind.com. But anger is also believed to be a secondary emotion. And I want us to think about this, because what happens when we begin to feel the anger is that we would have experienced a primary emotion first. And maybe if you reflect on this check-in that I gave you earlier, you think about that situation, that last situation or so, or the most intense situation for you that you remembered you were angry. Maybe you would remember a primary emotion that you experienced. It could have been a sense of loss. It could have been some fear. It could have been a sense of disrespect. It could have been some sadness that came over you before you became angry. And so mental health professionals tend to refer to this process as the anger iceberg. And this particular term is used by Therapist Aid. And if you go to therapistaid.com, it's a very useful site. I mean, a number of us mental health practitioners use this site. But this is the anger iceberg that they use. And they express on this is directly from the site. It says anger is an emotion that tends to be easy to see. However, anger is often just the tip of the iceberg, for other emotions may be hidden beneath the surface. Now look at this iceberg. The sadness. So maybe it was sadness that you felt. A situation happened and the first emotion, the primary emotion, was sadness. And you felt so sad you didn't know what to do with it. So you just became angry at the whole situation or at the person that caused the sadness in you. Anger is what we see. Many persons don't see the sadness. They see the lashing out, the anger. Or it might have been something of disappointment. You kept trying for a job. You kept applying to different schools. You kept doing all these things. You know, you've been walking and searching and applying, and it's just not coming through. You've been trying everything, whether it is job-wise, relationship-wise, personal. You're doing things to make yourself be in a better place, and it's just not happening. And you're disappointed. So how does that show up? It's in anger. That's what we see. That's what the top of that iceberg is, the anger that we see, the irritability, the lashing out, the rude comments, the demeaning words. Beneath that is really what's eating away at you. Is it the loneliness? Is it feeling overwhelmed? Is it maybe the embarrassment that you're carrying? Is it guilt and shame? Or that hurt that's been there like a gangrene for so long. And that's why it is said that hurt people hurt people. The anger that we see is because of the hurt that's beneath, the helplessness, the pain that you have been experiencing and going over and over, the frustration of life, the frustration at your job, the frustration that you can't move from where you're living and it is not an appropriate place, but you can't find another place because you can't afford it. And so it becomes a bigger sense of frustration. Your insecurity, all the insecurities in which you were raised and those that were thrown at you. You felt like you were never good enough. You were never celebrated. You were never lauded over something. You were never applauded. You were never just being cheerled in any way. And you just have this sense of insecurity. Insecurity about your academics, insecurity about your intelligence, insecurities about your body, insecurity about your speech, insecurity about everything. Sometimes it's the hunger. And we say that, we call it hangry in our field. Hungry and angry. Hangry. People, we have met really hungry people, and it could only sum up to this person is really hungry, like seriously, depraved of sugar or energy and drive. And this is why when people are hungry, they're irritable. Worse, they're hungry and tired. We see a different level of anger. And then grief. This right here, grief and loss create such deep anger, grief and loss, grieving, whether it's relationships or jobs or friendships, things you've lost, whether it's a marriage or a best friend relationship or a job that you've come to hold on to and it's just ripped from you. Grief is a painful thing. Sometimes it's losing home and everything you've worked for and earned. It's hard. Separation from something that you've been closely attached to. And sometimes the grief is medical. It's the physical issues and disabilities, and we can't grieve. We can't grieve our health enough because of where we're at. Anxiety, stress, when you're being threatened. We talk about when you're tired, the contempt, the guilt, jealousy, when you're scared. And in some families, anger is seen as more the acceptable emotion than any other emotion. So nobody sees you till you get angry. So what we're teaching our families, what we're teaching our children, what we're teaching those around us is that anger is to be recognized, that there's a response I get when I'm angry, and therefore this is what we're going to use. It's like raising a child. If every time they cry, you rush to them always, then the child learns the cue that if I cry, I get the attention. And some families only see anger, and therefore the members of that relationship lash out in anger because that's the only time I get seen. When I'm sad, nobody sees it. When I'm disappointed, nobody cares. Get over it. Get over it. It's been too long now. Okay, disappointment, come and go, just get over it. But if you get angry, throw a few mugs and glasses, slam a door, everybody hears that, right? And likely sees that. When you're dealing with shame and embarrassment, people hardly ever see that. That kind of hurt is so overlooked. But the minute you get angry and begin to be aggressive in your expression, that part is seen. And anger is not only in the loudness. There's a subtle anger that happens in all of us at different points. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But this is how some families have been raised, to show this, the tip of the iceberg, but never addressing the massive portion of the iceberg that's beneath the surface, beneath the eye level, beneath sea level, that you even notice. So a person might express anger in order to mask emotions that cause them to feel that vulnerable, such as hurt or guilt or shame. Anger triggers are people, places, situations, and things that set off anger. And your triggers can provide clues many times about the emotions that you're carrying behind that anger. And usually it's when you pause to check in with yourself. Why was I so angry? It wasn't even such a big deal. And then the truth begins to bring itself to the fore to you. It was your fear. It was the loneliness. It was the stress in the moment. Anger may be fueled by different emotions at different times, right? So we've only listed sometimes it's a fear, it could be fueled by any of these emotions and any other emotion even not listed here. And it could be by a combination of these emotions. Sometimes, however, anger is just anger. You're just angry, and it's coming from deeper than what anyone can see. It's probably since the lack of attachment since you were a baby. It's probably from, infantile stages where you can't even relay what happened, but there was an upbringing and something that traumatized you to this state in your life, and you're just angry. We look at some persons who are adults now and they've always been angry since a little kid. As far back, sometimes we do assessments and parents will say, since they were little, before they were verbal, they were just angry. So sometimes anger is just anger. Anger is an emotion that we feel like any other emotion. Anger can affect what you say or do even before you recognize feeling it. And this is where the trick is with anger. Because your anger can become second nature to you that you don't even notice it. You don't even realize. Somebody says, why are you angry? You're like, am I angry? You see me angry? Whoa. You don't even notice it. It's almost like how we get used to the hum of the refrigerator, or the hum of a fan that we are used to using, or sometimes maybe or AC or furnace systems. We are so used to it that we don't even know that it actually has a hum, because it's like a part of you. You never stop to notice it anymore. Anger shows up like that sometimes. And I could ask here, has anyone ever felt an anger that you were never even aware of, that it was so outright and it showed up? You never even noticed it. Maybe some persons threw things and never noticed till something breaks. You realize, oh my God, I'm angry. Many times, even what we know of crime of passion or things that were just accidental, persons didn't always. And my God, I have met some cases in my time in this field, being over 20 years in this field. You never saw it coming. Anger creeps up on you almost like second nature that you didn't even notice. So learning to recognize your triggers can help to better manage anger, but we're going to get more to some of those coping skills. Anger in men. And I decided tonight to put a little clip of this in how it shows up. I'm not a man, have no desire to be, can't speak with any authority on exactly everything that a particular man might feel, but generally how men show up in sessions with me when they're angry, generally how men that I've known in my own relationship and family and around me and I've seen and I've read about, that they tend to show up in a certain way like this, that anger looks somewhat differently in a man than it looks in a woman. And sometimes people think that men feel anger more intensely, but the data shows that it is not so. It's just that men tend to express their anger more outwardly, and women are considered to express their anger inwardly. And I tried tonight to kind of give a a scenario of how we tend to categorize men and women. So, you know, the nice guy or the man who's seen as a bully, or we know the woman is a nice lady, nice girl kind of approach, or she's the bossy type. I mean, there are other words we could use, but oh, praise God, we're keeping it nice in here. So the guy who is raised or taught to be this nice guy, he may show his anger from a man cave kind of view. He's angry. He goes away into whatever he considers to be his little man cave, his little den, his little alone space. Sometimes that's a basement room with an Xbox or PlayStation system. Sometimes it's that little room that is his thing. It's just his thing. We don't even know sometimes what's in that room, what is necessary to be in that room. It's just his space. And almost every man has that space. They find it. To some who don't have it at home, like in the house space to have that, it's sitting in their car. Maybe right there on the driveway, just sitting in their car. It's their little cave. For some, they will set up shop in their garage if they have to. It's their little thing. And it's where they go to be silent. And so this is the nice guy who is angry. He feels anger about certain things. And in his silence, he goes into this man cave. And he doesn't speak much. He does his thing, whether he's fixing, he has some tools, he's gaming, or he's just chilling there with whatever, God knows whatever, fixing old radio, doing some stuff, DIYs. That's his cave. But he does it in silence because he has that anger and he finds some answer and peace in that little man cave that he's carved out for himself. And he may open a conversation after the intensity has passed. And with a man, the conversation could be some hours or some days later. But he'll open a conversation. We're talking about the man who's raised to be nice, to be kind when he's angry. He will raise a conversation. He will want, even if it's not many words, he will be open to talk about something. And what he wants often in that space and time is to be understood and to be validated. He wants to know he's not doing a sloppy job of being that man, whether he's a husband or a father or whatever. He wants to be celebrated and his ego needs it. He needs it. It's important to his ego. And it's important for him to continue to feel like he is doing what he's supposed to do as a good man, to take care of his family, to lead his family, to be there, you know, to be protective, to care. It doesn't mean that for the woman, this is 100% what she wants, she's getting, but in his mind, he is doing the best he can with that space. He's not going to fight with you over this situation. He just walks away. And that sometimes is what becomes the trigger for the woman, but we're going to go into that in a little bit. So what he wants in that moment is to be understood and validated. And within a few days, he's fine. Now, anger in the bully kind of man, the controlling, the bully, he may show his anger in a verbal and or physical aggressive form. And often what we find is that this is characterized by an emotional or physical abuse. He's yelling, he's being threatening, coming up in your face. For some men, they dare to hit. And sometimes there may even be sexual abuse, financial abuse. He withholds support for his family. And eventually, of course, these lead to psychological abuse because this level of control and anger continues over time. And this anger in this kind of man. So we're looking at the two kinds, the nice guy and the bully guy. This anger is meant to control and subdue the prey, whoever that prey is. Whether it's a wife, spouse, partner, son, daughter, boss, somebody at the road, somebody at the store, it doesn't matter who that prey is. This is how this person's anger shows up, this man's anger. The woman, on the other hand, the nice lady, or the one who's trained to be nice, may also, like the man, show her anger in silence. And this is definitely not silence from a cave. She's not going in no cave, hiding in anywhere. Her silence is felt throughout the whole house, right? It's in the kitchen. It's the pots banging. But she's not talking. It's everything. Every cupboard is loud. Every door. It's her silence is no words from her mouth. But you may not necessarily get silence in the home with other things. But she is trying to be nice. She's trying not to be rude. She's trying not to be disrespectful. So she stops speaking, zips the lip, but everything else speaks. And sometimes this anger in her, when it's not in the words and that silence, you also see a lot of tears, very emotional. Cooking, wiping tears. Washing the dishes, tears. Doing the laundry, teary, sniffles. In the room, in the shower, wherever, any space. It's a very emotional thing because it's holding something on the inside that's tearing her apart. And it's the only way because she's taught to be submissive, subservient, nice, kind, or at least trying to be the best self in this situation. And it doesn't have to be just a spousal relationship, even at work. Even when somebody's rude to you in the store. It's some of this. And then what the woman does as well, what the nice lady does as well with the anger is to be very self-critical. I'm not good enough. Nothing I do is right. I can never get it right. I should have known I can't manage this relationship. I should have known I shouldn't have taken this job. I should have not, I should have, it's all of that. It's very self-critical because the fault is now turned inwardly. Now that breeds a lot of guilt and shame. And so there's some sense of self-hurt that comes with that anger. And the self-hurt is not the self-harm in which we see women going to necessarily cut or whatever. It's that woman who is going to drown herself in social media. It's that woman who is going to overeat or undereat. It's that woman who is going to do something that is going to feel like they have control in that moment of something else because I can't control how I really want to respond. I have to swallow all this anger on the inside and it's imploding. It's imploding. And for some women, it's taking all of that out in prayer as well. It's the crying, the hollering, the constant, the everyday. So for a woman, she may not have what is similar to a man cave, but maybe it's that prayer closet. It's that place where she brings herself to hide away from it all so that all that anger can go there. And this is usually to avoid the further possible conflicts. So a woman tends to withdraw. She will stop speaking if it seemed like a nice lady, the nice girl, the nice woman. If it seems like it's going to cause possible conflicts, the more she's trying to explain herself or to say something, it's worsening, it's causing the person to be angrier, she will just shut off because it's the only way. And then all of that to be invalidated in that moment, to not given a chance to get out this anger, it's turned inwardly. And the inward creates all of what we've talked about before. She may become very agreeable. Very agreeable. Yep. Of course. Oh, yeah. Everything is yes, because if sharing her true feelings will make the other person uncomfortable, she's going to be agreeable to everything that you say. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. Is this, it's okay. Everything is good. And anytime a woman says she's fine, everything is okay, she is an angry woman, whoever she's in the presence of. That posture is hiding the anger beneath. She's done talking and she's angry. She may open a conversation after the intensity. For the woman, she wants the conversation many times. If she can get it right there, let's just deal with this, because she's not going to any cave. But if that's not happening, she shuts down, and she may open the conversation after the intensity has passed. But this could be hours. The man is hours or days. For the woman, lucky if it's hours. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years. But then she feels guilty even in that time, because she's using her energy to protect someone other than herself. She doesn't feel like she's her true and genuine self. And so she implodes in a lot of guilt inside and shame and trying to overdo and to compensate. But that is coming from the place of resentment and aggression imploded, because there's no scope to put it out there, because she is taught, or society expects her to be nice, or she's seen as the angry woman. No, the woman who's the bossy kind, who doesn't care anything about being nice, may show, like the bully male, may show some verbal or physical aggression. The woman will be loud. The woman will threaten as well. The woman may even first hit. That happens too in the bossy woman. And this is characterized by the loudness and what's considered by society and the social norms to be unladylike by others. So a woman has to do this dance. If I raise my voice, or even if it's not yelling and screaming, if I become a voice, if I give voice to my thoughts, to what I'm feeling, to what I'm thinking, then I'm not ladylike, right? And so it's, should I remain voiceless, behave dumb, just listen, just take it, just accept it, do nothing, and then implode on the inside? And so this is a dance for the woman who operates in a lot more of her feelings, wanting to own her feelings. But if she goes on one extreme, she's a bully, bossy, controlling woman and unladylike. And if she goes to the ladylike approach, she's not being herself. She implodes, she goes into tears, she's critical of herself, and it's the extremes. She may feel powerless and helpless in the fight to protect herself from the image that the world now sees. She's a nagging woman. I mean, even the scripture talks about that, right? She's or maybe seen as a vulgar woman. You know, that a nagging woman is like a dripping roof. That is nagging, right? So society uses those terms. You're vulgar, you're nagging, you're too loud, you're unladylike. And so these are the extremes. So what does she choose? This anger reflects feeling stuck in a cycle. So this woman who constantly feels like everybody tells her she's vulgar and she's nagging and she's loud and she's not ladylike, she feels stuck in a cycle where she can't fit in the image of the social norms or expectations of people who are closest to her. And so your anger warning signs, though, how do you know when you're really angry? How do you know that it is not just sadness you're feeling? And Therapist Aid has given a number of these that person's experience. I've put the list up here. Some people say their mind goes blank. They just black out because they're so angry that they don't even know what happened after that statement or that thing was done, or they just went blank. Persons know they're getting angry when their bodies or hands just shake, when you are breathing fast or heavy, when you start to scream, or you notice you're raising your voice or you're yelling. Some people punch walls, some become argumentative, some throw a glass plate, some throw objects. Some people pace around a room, just pacing. Some people, their anger comes out by insulting other persons. They just lash out. It's just to demean you, put you down, and then you know they're angry. Some persons, you see them start sweating. For some persons, they stare at other people aggressively. The stare that they give you, the look. I mean, many of us grew up with that look as kids, certainly if you're from the Caribbean. Some persons, it's a clenched fists. You feel it clenching and unclenching, and you know that you're angry. You start to feel hot and sweaty and sticky. You feel like you're going to black out. You're going to pass out. And then there are those persons who just go silent. Woo! They go quiet in a second and just shut down. Nothing more. That's an angry person. It's a subtle sign of anger. And then there are those who feel the headache. Persons turn red in their faces. Persons scowl or make angry faces. Persons feel sick to their stomach. Some become very aggressive and will grab others. Some cry. And some just start to overthink. You just ruminate all the time on the problem. So how does your anger show up? How does it show up? And it shows up differently in different places. For some of us, it's our face that shows up in the meeting room. But for others, it's your voice that shows up at home. How does it show up for you? Dr. Harriet Lerner says here that just as physical pain tells us to take our hands off the hot stove, the pain of our anger preserves the very integrity of ourselves. And she says this in her book, The Dance of Anger. Our anger can motivate us to say no to the ways in which we are defined by others. And it also motivates us to say yes to the dictates of our inner self. Our anger may also be a signal that we're doing more and giving more than we can comfortably do or give. Anytime more is required of you, demanded of you than you can comfortably give, there is anger that's brewing beneath that. And this is where many persons become very resentful. They feel like they're doing everything at home, everything by themselves. There's not enough to give. Or some people become angry if other people keep doing everything for them and making them feel incompetent. So that's also the extreme of that anger. What does the Bible say about anger? The portion of the scripture that we had, that Brother Durbin read so beautifully for us tonight, very long scripture, but if you read Exodus 32, this is the dance between God and Moses in their anger spiel. It was interesting. And if you didn't read it, I'd encourage you to go back to that portion of scripture, because God was angry at the Israelites. He said they're this stiff-necked people, he's going to destroy them. And Moses said to him in verse 12, why should the Egyptians say it was the evil intent that he brought them out to kill them out of the mountains and wipe them off? You're going to let the Egyptians that you took us from speak badly about us? Hear what Moses said to God: turn from your fierce anger. Relent and don't do that. Don't say that you're going to destroy these people. And the very word he gave to God, the scripture said God relented. He changed his mind and said, okay, Moses, I hear you. I'm going to behave better with my anger. I'm going to take control of this anger and not let it cause me to destroy them. And just leaving God's presence, coming down from Mount Sinai and hearing the singing and the loud noise, not the singing, the loudness of what was happening with the people. Joshua said, that's the voice of war, and it's not a singing of victory going on. And when Moses saw that they built a golden calf and was worshiping it, the anger, the fierce anger by verse 19, Moses approached the camp, saw the calf, and his anger burned that he threw the tablets out of his hand, breaking them to pieces into powder and forcing them to drink it. Trigger points can make people do things they never dreamed that they would do. And every one of us can fall prey to that. Not one of us is infallibly that way. Every one of us. And so James writes in verses 19 and 20, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. And Reverend May shared that in Bible study just last week. That's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce. Hear why? Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It can produce terrible outcome when we are angry. And that's why it's important to try not to be angry. But we are going to get angry. We're going to get angry. Proverbs tells us that. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And a gentle answer is not necessarily just your words. Sometimes even what you do. That's a gentle answer. It's a gentle response. It's a response that's not triggering. Some people say, I didn't do anything, but that is the trigger that created the anger for the person that you really were trying to hurt. Harsh words stirs up anger. Harsh actions stir up anger. Harsh behavior stirs up anger. And hear what Paul writes in Ephesians 4:26. And this same passage he brought from the Psalm in Psalm 4. He says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Give no place to the devil. You hear that? Give no place to the devil, because the devil will use it, and this is why it will not produce the righteousness that God desires. But I know that we get angry. Jesus himself was angry. You read Matthew 21, verses 12 and 13. Jesus was so angry. He went in the temple. He flipped tables, turned over the money changers' tables and where they were selling doves. All the stools that the men sat on, and he flipped it because he was angry. He was angry. So things will trigger you. But in your anger, do not sin. His cause was righteous because of what they were doing in the temple. And we want to bear that in mind, that there are helpful ways to manage your anger. Very helpful ways. Talk it out in a respectful way with someone who makes you feel safe. And we cannot overemphasize that in this room. So whether you're going to do it in prayer to God that you feel safest with, you're going to do it with a friend that you can trust, that they're not going to invalidate you and further judge you, they'll make you feel safe, or a counselor, professional person, a mental health practitioner, therapist, whatever you call them, maybe even a coach, a mental health coach who can help you, people who are trained professionally to help you manage this in a safe way. Also identify the source of your anger. It's important. You're just angry at everybody. You're angry at everybody, yelling at Dick, Tom, Harry, everybody. You need to identify the source of your anger. Why are you angry? Who are you really angry at? Because a lot of what we find in anger too is displacement. You're angry at your husband, you kick the dog. You're angry at your child, that you kick the cat. You know, those are things we sometimes put the anger on the lesser person in terms of, you know, hierarchy or status in work life or home or so on, the person that's less likely to respond in the same way. And it's displacement, we call it. So be aware of your triggers. What's triggering you? When someone does something or says something and you know it's a trigger, you need to be aware of what triggers you. It's just like, you know, for example, I know if I walk into a place where egg is being prepared, a lot of egg, I'm nauseated. I'm going to feel right in that moment like I'm going to pass out. So I avoid the presence of that. Be aware of your triggers. I read everything for milk because I know how intolerant I am. Be aware of your triggers. What is it that makes you angry? Avoid those people or those places or those things. And when you can't, practice diversion. Diversion is very important. It's a healthy, practical way of doing something that takes your mind off it. So maybe going for a walk, maybe watching a movie, and please, not a movie that's going to trigger it more, not playing a song that's going to trigger it more. Do something that's will, in a healthy way, cause you to move away from the anger. Do something opposite action, opposite action. Take time outs. Even if it's in a relationship where there are some, anger passing through here, expression, harsh words being exchanged, people say things when they're upset. Take time out. Somebody needs to take a time out. Take a time out, right? And be planful about the time out. Does that mean, okay, we're going to visit this in an hour when we're both calm? Some people can't be calm in an hour. Some of us are hypersensitive and find it difficult to come back to baseline. Some persons need 5 days to get to baseline because they're coming down nicely and then they remember it and they shoot it back, right? But some persons are like, I think, Ref prayed about that, like bamboos. Like you light bamboo, it blow up and it's done, right? We get angry, I'm done because the anger comes out. Others are days and weeks and it takes some time. So be planful about what time you need, how you're going to make this work. What does it mean? Okay, we need to take a time out. We need to take a break from this relationship, or I need a few days from work. Whatever it is that you need, be planful about it and take time out if you need to. Know your warning signs. So whether you start to breathe faster, heavier, you start to sweat, you feel you're clenching and unclenching, you feel like your lips quivering. Some people know when they're getting angry. It's the pre-escalated period. We want to come back down to baseline. We want to get you regulated. When people are dysregulated, there's nothing you can do in that moment. So we want to catch the pre-period of that. And when you feel you're getting there, your head starts to hurt. Your mind is racing. Your thoughts are, the signs. Breathe, just breathe, and take whatever diversion method you need to do in that moment. Excuse yourself nicely from a meeting, excuse yourself from the space, and go outside, get fresh air, just do something to bring yourself down. Be reflective in quietness about your anger. And this is what Psalm 4:4 says, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts, on your beds, and be silent. And be silent. It's important in quietness and trust that you learn to bring yourself down in that moment. And prayer is very essential for that. Being reflective about the anger that you feel is very important. And sometimes after you get to that space and place now, you can go and talk it over with someone else and say, I realized that I really was more angry than it warranted. But only in quiet reflection will you know that and realize that. And these are ways that you can cope in your anger.